Pam, you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes you just got to, thank you. Sometimes you just have to get away from everything that you deal with at times, you know. Lord began to speak to me in this chapter, Ezekiel 37:1, and he began to show me a different aspect or the way to look at it. And I guess the reason that he was doing that is because I was probably in the same shape that Ezekiel's in here. I'm just going to be honest about it. You know, there are those times in ministry where you get burnt out. There are those times when you are working and constantly working with someone, or someone struggling or calling you, or, you know, and there is times when you have planned things with your wife and something else comes up, and because you feel committed and dedicated, you sometimes put your family to the side a little bit. Because the calling that's in you, you can't help but to do what you're called to do, if you really have that purpose. Several years ago, Brother Gary and I were sitting together talking over a cup of coffee, and I believe it was out of my house when you were painting my porch, which I will never forget that you did that. And I think we were both kind of at a place where we were just trying to figure out what it is or where we fit into this whole scheme of things. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not always sure where I fit in at. Because I'm not the norm that everybody thinks. One of the young men that's in our recovery group is 23 years now clean from cocaine. Tattoo artist. And just a bald-headed, looking like a tattoo artist type. You know, the tattoos everywhere. And he looked at me one day and he said, "Preacher," he said, "you scare me." I said, "Why do I scare you?" He said, "Because you don't act like other preachers I've met." Now, I took that as a compliment. No offense to anyone else, but I took that as a compliment because I think sometimes we get so staunch in who we are and we try to be something we're really not. And when they can't really see who you are, they really don't want anything more to do with you. Because if there's anything in that it can tell, it's when somebody's not being who they are. I mean, they know what it's like. You know, and so I start looking at some of those things, and the Lord has been bringing us through quite a journey in the last while, over the last 3 or 4 years. And I mean, areas I just question, I would have questions about all the time. You know, the deaths that we've seen, our family, I lost my dad to an accident, not, you know, anything expected, and backed off of an embankment where a food line is and was thrown out of the vehicle and was killed on the highway there. And not within the next year to year and a half, lost both of Lola's parents, mother and father. Not things that, you know, I mean, knowing that at some time it was going to happen, never felt like my dad was going to die that way. You know, he'd done beat cancer. He'd had half a lung taken off that God had put back. And he'd been through so many different things that were the struggle. And I like what Pastor Bishop Huskin said at his funeral when he said that Jack had beat so many things that the devil had to sneak up on him to get him. And I like that attitude of that thought of that thing, that, you know, he had to be taken in a way that he wasn't expected to be taken, because he done knew how to handle the situations that came into his face. But, you know, the more that I have been without my father over the last years, the more I've appreciated who he was. I hate that sometimes, Brother Gary, we wait until they're gone to realize how precious they were to us. Now, I don't just mean because he was a loving dad, but the representation of the father. You know, my dad's passion when he first gave his heart to the Lord was he was just had a real heart to go into the jails and to minister in jails, and he ministered in prisons. And guess what he did? He'd bring the rest of us along with him. And I'm going to be honest with you. It's not that I dislike what I was doing, but it wasn't what I thought I was going to be doing. And I wasn't really that happy with going there and doing it all the time, but because I honored my father, I did what he asked me to do, because his passion was to be there. And if his passion was to be there and I expected to be anything like who he was, then I had to learn how to subject myself. Because you see, in my younger days, I thought I was too good a man to be doing that. I was going to have a better ministry than that. But you know what I found myself doing? I found myself getting down to what I wanted the message today is. I found myself getting down to the bones of who I am. You see, instead of just seeing dry bones, what I got to begin to understand and see is there's good bones. Anybody ever look at an old house that's all decrepit and tore apart? I mean, when somebody gets ready to redo a house, they're going to make sure it's got good bones. Make sure that the structure is sound. Make sure that everything. But you know what you got to do sometimes before you can get to the place where you can start building? Sometimes you got to strip away everything that was there to begin with that you thought was the way it was supposed to look so it can be built back on again. Sometimes you got to get to a place in your ministry and in your life where you wonder, God, where am I going to go from here? You know, I've got a building over in Pennsylvania that's 30 feet wide by 100 and some feet long. It's got a social hall, blacktop parking lot. Brother Gary and Miss Pam have both been there and ministered. It's a nice facility. And at 61 years old, Brother Gary, I didn't want to change. What I really wanted to do at 61 was coast it to the place where I felt like I could turn it over to my son-in-law, Clint, who is my associate pastor, and let him take it from there. And from that point on, as someone kind of resting or relaxing a little bit, I speak when I wanted to, not when I didn't want to. Didn't have the responsibility of all the phone calls any longer. I'm really glad that my brother-in-law's lake house doesn't have a lot of cell phone service, because while I'm here, I haven't got a lot of calls. Brother, I struggled to the point to where I could not sit down and look at the Word and stay with it long enough to get something. Has anybody else ever been in a place where you're so overwhelmed by everything that's going on and everything that you're doing that you're struggling? You're kind of just to the place where you think, God, I'm standing in a valley nobody even knows I'm standing in right now. You know what it's like to be from a family like mine where they have ministries to television evangelists, written 4 books? Goes all over the world. See, everybody expects you to be like the rest of them. There's something that's expected from a family that has a destiny, that are generationally have been in the house of God, who are standing up. My dad and mom were both ministers in the house. I'm a minister from coming up through the house. My brother Lynn is a minister. My sister Lisa pastors Word of Deliverance, where we're going to have the youth camp this week. I've got a nephew, Jeremy, who has a church in Winchester, Word That Frees Church. I've got family that are worship leaders and song leaders and singers. It's just a generation. But you know, my family didn't start that way. My family started with a real problem of addiction to alcohol. My great-grandfather was an alcoholic. My grandfather on both sides were alcoholics. My grandmother was an alcoholic. My dad was an alcoholic until he came to about 30-some years old when he finally realized he needed God. I was headed down the road of addiction and didn't even realize it because it had been in my generations, one generation to the next generation. And any of you who have any experience with addiction know that a lot of times when it's running in a family, it's something that can be inherited. And all of a sudden, my dad laying on his bed one night, not realizing who God really was or anything in that way. There's something we celebrate all the time. We've got plaque. I got a plaque in my church. There's a plaque in my sister's church that says, here's the thing that Dad said on his bed that night. Lord, if you save me, I'll serve you. 7 words that changed a family's direction and world. 7 words that took us from addiction to alcoholism, addiction from everything else, and turned us around and changed what the generations of this family are going to be or who are. And I look at my children and my children's children. I say, God, I thank you that not only is addiction hereditary, but so is your promises that you give to us each one. I know that not only am I blessed, but my children's children going to be blessed. When I look at my little 2-year-old grandson, he hops up on my lap, and I look at him and say, where's Jesus live? In my heart. He lives in my heart. Those are all wonderful things, and I thought about all that, and I think about my heritage, and I think about my dad all the time, more so now probably than I did before. And I am so glad that we took the time to go to the truck stop every morning, Brother Gary, and have breakfast together last years of his life. But I was in a place where I was just so messed up, I didn't know whether I was coming or going. Now I'm forced to a place to where everybody that was coming to the church is from Berkley. Nobody from Pennsylvania is coming. Since I moved to Berkeley, I got somebody traveling from McConnellsburg over now. And the Lord was dealing with me anyway because we work with addiction and drug awareness, and we're really expanding to doing a lot more than that. But in those areas of those things, we're working in the town that I live in. Everybody knows me in the town that I live in. This is where I'm effective at. This is where people. I had a man walk up to me the other day, and he said, "Brother Jack," he said, "there are ministers, and then there are ministers like you." He said, "I put you above a lot of the others because of what you do and where you go." And I hear people come up to me all the time. I hear about the good things you're doing. I'm wondering where they hear about it at. Because my church is 25 to 30 people right now. But they're hearing it from people who need what we have to offer. And you know what I love about my dad? He never tooted his own whistle. He never showboated who he was. In all the years that he had conference, and they're still having those conferences continually. One time in the whole time he was pastor of that house did he ever minister in his own conference. And you know, I started looking at that. So there are some times, Miss Pam, where we got to get down to dry bones. We got to get down to bare bones. We got to get down to good bones so we can build from what's there. Because a lot of times we get disillusioned or we miss the purpose that we're called to. And what Brother Gary sit down and said one day, it's simple as this. We're just supposed to love God and love people. There are a lot of speakers out there that don't have squat behind it. But you give me a man, brother, whose life shows something more than his words do. And that's a man somebody else can look to and follow when there's a real need. That's why my dad spent his times in the jails, because sometimes he was in the jails. Literally. The day my mama gave her heart to the Lord, my dad had been going all weekend, drinking. He'd been fighting. He'd been running from the law. Couldn't find the keys to his vehicle. My Aunt Jenny invited Mom and me and her kids. That's us, me. I was just a kid then. Come to church, at Nazarene Church on Sunday. I've seen my mom and dad. I can see my mom get pretty mad at times. I seen when my dad would come home like that, I remember his friends would just take the whole car seat out of the back of the car and set it in the yard and go before Mom got outside. Because they was afraid what Mom was going to say. And I seen my mama get so mad at him that she just wanted to tear him apart, and she tried to wail on him and hit him, and Dad would just grab her and pull her in tight. And he'd say, "Now don't, Shirley, now don't." He would never hit her, but she sure was trying to wail on him. And I'm standing in the corner crying, "Please, Mom, don't hurt my dad. Don't hurt Dad, Mom." Now, I can laugh about it today, brother, but I remember the day when that was not funny to me. I remember the fights. I remember the times. And I was worried when he finally got the message. Mom left the message at the house. "If you get home in time, pick us up from church." Mom gets in the car, and Dad's expecting pretty much what he gets every other time he's been out like that. And you know what Mom said to him? She said, "Jack, that's my name too. I'm named after my dad. Not my middle name, just my first name. Jack, I'm not going to fight with you anymore. God came into my heart and he saved me. I'm not going to fight you no more." You know, Ezekiel was taken into the valley and he's put in the midst of dry bones. And here's the thing. It says that he's there for a while. God wants him to take a good look, Miss Pam. Sometimes in our struggles, sometimes when we get to that place, all we can see is dry bones. God wants it sometimes in the midst of where we're at in that place, begin to realize this is not as bad a place as you think it is. It's just a place for you to reassess who you are. Understand that your life is not over. Your ministry is not ended. You got good bones, and all we need to do yet on that is build on what you already have. But you got to realize that there's still some good bones there. You got to realize that you're not destitute and lost. Because that's what I thought for a little while. I still struggle. I still don't get a check every week. Because you know what, God? I asked God, I said, God, don't send me people that are coming from one church to another church. Give me people from off the streets. And he's doing that. But they don't understand any of the principles. I should have said, Lord, mix it up a little bit till we get, I'm just, God will give you what you ask for. And so in the midst of that, in the struggles of the house and the church, we've decided that it's cheaper for us to have our meetings in Berkley, shut down the church so that we don't have electric bills any longer. We're still making church payment. We're still making the insurance on it, but we don't have the other expenses. We don't have the expense of traveling over there, and start having services in the town that we're going to try to set up in and do. And so, we're having services now at Angus and Ale by the Best Western there where everybody stays for conference. And the young man who has that, him and my son played football together. And his mother was an elder in our church until she moved away, got married and moved away. So he says to me, I love you. If you want to use this, you use it for as long as you need to, and it's not going to cost you anything. So we're not paying anything to use it. We're meeting there at the Best Western. The only thing I hate about it is loading the drums and the guitar and all that stuff in on Sunday, loading it back out on Sunday after you're done. I want a permanent place. But as I'm down to bare bones and I'm thinking about the different things, in the midst of all that, my focus has had to be on what's being done that's being effective. See, because in the midst of dry bones, you can't just sit down and sit in your little and begin to weep and wail and cry and boo-hoo me, God, and look how much I've done, and nobody cares what I've done. And you know how we can sometimes get because we want to read God off what we've done for him. And I'm going to be honest with you. God doesn't base it on what you do for him. He never did. It's all about the grace of God and Calvary's tree. It's all about what he did for us. We got no reason to complain. But while this wasn't going the way it was supposed to, and I'm seeking the Lord for direction, our Life for Drugs thing is just going great. We meet every Tuesday night. We have 35 to 40 people. Just during our last meeting, an hour and a half, we had 2 overdoses in our town. Just during an hour and a half meeting, we are one of the worst areas for overdoses. West Virginia has the highest rate of overdoses from opioids and addiction than any other state in the, not anything to be proud about. And see, the problem is we're close to Baltimore. We're only 120 miles from Baltimore, and Baltimore is the heroin capital of the U.S. So heroin is our biggest problem, and the opioid, the addiction of heroin is our biggest problem. And so we have that. They'll drive down just to get a fix and come back. And so while we are looking at some of these other things and are struggling, and I can't sleep at night. I can't focus because my mind is just going so many different directions, Miss Pam, because I want the Lord to do everything right away because I'm really an impatient person. I have a lot of problems with wanting it done now. I told Miss Lola we started packing to get ready to leave, and she had to go to work that day, but I still loaded the suitcase and stuff in the car that morning. I don't want to wait till evening because I want to have that out of the way. So I get a little impatient, about waiting for God. And man, I can remember struggling and seeking the Lord and looking for, direction. And we end up coming to Pastor Randy's conference in January. And we were down to Pastor Randy's. And I'm going to be honest, we were struggling with who we are. But pastors know how to put on a smile. And we do that not just because we don't want people to know we're having the problem, because we don't want people to be brought down any farther than they are, because they're already having problems. So ministry kind of, at times we smile and go right on. When I lost my grandson, I did not let that affect my word when I got up behind the pulpit, because that's not what you do. You don't let them know you have feelings. You continue to preach the gospel and the truth of it. And it was the truth, and it's what helped me get through that time. But at the same time, ministry has a knack sometimes of not letting people in because of you're dealing with enough already. But we were there, and I remember going to bed, and first time God's ever done this to me. First time he's ever done this to me. And I'm struggling, and I've been tossing and turning half the night. 3:30 in the morning, I feel a hand on my shoulder. And I hear God say to me, son, in the softest, calmest voice, like my dad used to say. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't care how old you get. When there's a struggle in your life, and you could go talk to your mom and dad if you still had them. It's just something about the hand of your dad and calling you by name, son. In that moment when he said son, whew, something changed. And he said, son, why are you so stressed? So I started telling him why. And you know what he said? He said, son, I never told you to worry about that. I never required you to struggle like that. I never asked you to be anything but who you were in me. I never asked you. I never asked you to stress about how this is going to work. That's my job. You just need to learn how to put your trust in me. You need to learn how to just rely on me. Because be honest about it. There's nothing I can do about it anyway. I'm wasting a lot of time and frustration and time I could be more focused with my family. And my wife can tell you even now, I still have trouble sometimes staying focused. When I sit down to study, I start on Wednesday, and I'm clear to Sunday before I get it all together. I work on a little bit each day. But I'm learning that I don't have dry bones. I got good bones. I'm learning that what's happening now is God is just simply redesigning who I was and making me who I am destined to be. I love that. I love that. But see, I'm going to have to walk through the bones for a while. Because until I get it, I can't walk out of here. Until I start thinking other than that it's over, that it's too late. And I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't want to start over a new church. I didn't want to start at 60. I wanted to start again. I didn't want to find another place to have a ministry. And man, then God starts telling me, well, he said, it's not going to be about just your church. Because what you have this time is not going to be just to come in on a Sunday and have a service. It's going to be about helping addicts. It's going to be about helping people with addiction. It's going to be a place for a crisis when it comes. We're going to put some people in here who's going to help with training people and getting them refocused. Because, see, what people don't understand is when you're an addict for long enough, the only thing that it completely changes how you think. It's not about just getting clean. It's about changing your thinking. It's about not... Today, you're not worried about once you get this hit, where am I going to get the money to get the next hit? Now you got to focus on life. And if you don't start focusing or turn their thoughts towards something that is beneficial, then they're going to go right back to what they were before. And so you got to give them a vision of something. And you got to start small. You can't give them a big vision because it's overwhelming with somebody that don't know how to think right now. We've got to reprogram that. So then we start with little things. We had a young man started coming to our addiction meetings on Tuesday nights, and he would get on his bicycle. He's a grown man. He had a son about 7 years old. He would hop on the little metal things on each side of that back tire and ride 3 miles with his dad to our addiction recovery meetings on Tuesday nights because he'd lost his license and he was on probation. He was on probation because he stole a Christmas tree. He had the money to buy a Christmas tree, but he needed the heroin more than he needed the Christmas tree. So he would get his heroin, and then he said, I'll steal the Christmas tree. And he got caught. That young man would ride to our meetings with his son on the back, on a bicycle, in the wintertime. We had a young man that used to ride his moped, come in barefooted sometimes in cold weather to be in our meetings. We lost him to an overdose 2 years ago. He was clean for a long time and then decided to try again one time. Not every story is a success story. Now we have his family, his mom and dad there, because our group is not about just addiction. It's about family who have lost people in addiction. And families who, don't understand addiction. And we bring them together to talk so that the addict can hear what the family has had to go through, and the family can hear why the addict is like they are. Our sheriff now has really come a long ways into understanding about opiate use and addiction. You know why? Because his son overdosed. See, it's not a certain class of people. It's not what we used to think it was. It's doctors and lawyers. It's grandmas. We have a 62-year-old that's 3.5 years clean. We have a lady that's coming, she's 30-some years old, and we asked what her goals were since she's gotten clean, and she said, I would like to have a family and a baby if I could ever get over my addiction. Because she knows she couldn't do it the way she was. This young man that started coming on his bike got his license back, got a job. Now he owns his own business, 2 trucks, and a house in 3 years. In 3 years. Because somebody showed him that where he was at wasn't his life sentence. It was just a glitch in the road of his life. I mean, we all have glitches in our life that we got to get past it. You know, our biggest problem is trying to get past what's already happened. Forgetting the struggles that we're doing, on a daily basis. We have a hard time getting past it. So, with me, I have a hard time getting past the fact I got to sell my church now. Shouldn't have to be this way at 61 years old. But it's becoming more liberating all the time, because now the journey's not about trying to maintain or keep. The struggle is not about keeping the upkeep of a building or anything like that. It's about focusing on what is important. Love God, love people. Because if you do this, you've kept all the other commandments. We struggle every day with situations, and what we got to begin to understand is here was Joseph. You said you just preached on him last week. Here was Joseph. He was beaten and thrown into a pit by his brothers. He is in one of the most dysfunctional, messed up families you can think of. Even his dad's messed up and dysfunctional. You don't think he is? While the other boys is out tending sheep, Joseph's just laying around the house. While Joseph's being told how good a kid he is, the other 10's facing the other side of that. And not only on that, he's done married 2 sisters. Can you imagine the nightmare of marrying 2 sisters? If it was the other way, come on now. I mean, as brothers and sisters, there are times when I'm the oldest. Lynn is my little brother. Whenever people say to me anymore, I'm not Lynn's brother. Lynn's my brother. He got his looks if he's got any from me. When Mama seen me, she says she done such a good job, she'd just try again. After she had Lynn, she didn't quit. She was trying 5 more times after that. But there's a struggle in siblings sometimes just because there's that little bit of jealousy. Come on, every one of you, every now and then, that little bit of envy because he's done a little better than you, or you know what I'm saying? Can you imagine what it'd be like with having sister wives? And then Joseph, being inexperienced and young, he's going to flaunt in front of his brothers what God showed him in a dream. That's not going to help him at all. And then on top of that, when he comes to see him, he's wearing his brand new coat of many collars that his father gave him, because his father, he's his favorite one. It is not good when the other kids know who the favorite is. I made it my point not to have a favorite. I love them all the same. They're unique and different, each and every one. I'm glad that they have their own personalities. I'm glad of how they've come up and who they are and what they've done and where they've been. And yeah, they've had some glitches and some things. But I look at them like my father looks at me. He don't see the bad. All he sees is the good. Because they're mine. Joseph gets beat up. He's thrown into a trench. It's used to catch water. He's went down. He is bound. He's laying there looking at the dirt. He's tied hand and foot. He's thirsty, parched, dry. And his brothers are having lunch right beside of him. And they're eating good. I don't know how you feel. I'd be wondering where that dream was. Down, down, down. That's not, then he goes down to Egypt. Then he goes down to Potiphar's house. But you know what I noticed about, and here's the thing that turned my thinking around about what this valley is really supposed to represent. Everywhere that he goes, he makes the best of it. Do you know what I had to do when I wasn't sure about where I was going or what direction God was going to take me? And I'm still not sure about some of the things. I focused on what I could make a difference in. I focused on Life for Drugs. I focused on, being a part of that. We have just been, there is a national organization called Facing Addiction. You can look it up on the web. It's a big program. Started back in about 2014. It's a big movement. And the movement about it is getting into places where we're electing officials that are more sensitive to the need of addiction and what you need to do for recovery. And we're pushing in our area for more places to detox. We're in the Eastern Panhandle, have the biggest problem with addiction, and we have to drive 3.5 hours to the closest clinic that we can take our patients to. At least 2.5 to 3 hours. So now, though, we are partnering with Facing Addiction, and we're partnering with Berkley County, and I'm now a member of what's called HEART. It's Healthcare Advocates for Addiction. They've asked me to join their program. I've been down sharing at the hospital. There's doctors, there's psychologists, there's nurses, and they're wanting to change the attitude of doctors and nurses towards addiction and the way we look at it and the way they feel about it. And now we have a 16-bed rehab in Martinsburg, which is only 25 minutes from us. And there was 15 pilot programs that Facing Addiction was going to do. And see, we really felt lucky that we were chosen to be one of those pilot programs, except that we have such a problem is why we got it chosen. We're in with cities like Tampa, Florida, Chicago, Illinois, and but here's what I found out. There can be a group of people start something not knowing anything at all about what they're doing. And if they really have a passion for what they're doing, they can be educated pretty quickly on how to deal through the experience of hearing others talk. And those that we've been with, I've learned now that there are triggers we got to deal with all the time. There's places you have to avoid. There's even songs sometimes that people can't hear. Some people, trigger is they see a sign that says Baltimore on it and it triggers them. I didn't realize all these other things came along with addiction. I didn't realize that your mind changes so terribly. Now, some of our recovering, I don't like to call them addicts. And see, some of them still believe that you have to say that your whole life to remind you. See, I'm a new creation. I'm a brand new man, and I remind them every now and then, you may have been an addict, but now you're recovering. And when you recover, you're not that any longer. But we've got now, they're going in, we've been allowed to go into our schools now and have assemblies. So we've hit 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. We've held assemblies in every one of those, and I had the principal of the high school walk up to me and say, this is the best program and presentation I've ever seen for addiction that I've ever seen. And see, it's not just all about God, and that is a big portion of it. But guys, I got to tell you something. Our remedy has always been lay hands on somebody and pray for them, but you need a whole lot more than that if you've been in addiction. Now, I know God can divinely change your life and turn you around. I know that, and I believe in miracles, but not everybody finds it that way. And we can't just lay hands on and walk away sometimes. Sometimes we got to stay with the person, watch them progress, talk to them, let them know that if you fall, you can get back up again. We're not going to block you from coming to meeting just because you had a bad week and you slipped up. Continual ministry all the time, coming back. And now they're giving back to our communities. Now we're going to get ready to start a Team Hope, which is for 10 to 14-year-olds who have parents of addiction. We did an essay in the 7th grade for some of our children and asked them, how has heroin affected you and your family's lives? We get stories like, me and my brother have to keep my dad busy while mom's upstairs snorting her pills so he don't find out she's snorting pills. We get stories like I'm laying here praying that dad don't beat mom until the police get here. We had one person come and say, I got my first shot of heroin at 12 years old. My dad gave it to me. See, we need to get not just those that are in recovery. We need to prevent. We need to have programs of prevention. Now some of our people who have been through jail to get clean and said that it saved their lives want to go back now and do an addiction program in our Eastern Regional Jail, where we have about 550 people that are incarcerated right now because we've had really big drug bust in the last while. There's been a 3-state federal government thing that has 1 mile from my house. We had a dealer busted with $20-some thousand and 100 grams of heroin. Put him in jail, made bond the next day. Last week they did another raid on his house. He had 88 more grams and $13,000 more cash. And he's not even been to the first arraignment yet. And the second one's already happened. And Pam, you know the worst thing? This young man was in church at Word of Deliverance. I prayed with him in our youth camps around the altars. And I've helped him seek the Lord and find the Holy Ghost. And this is what he's come to with his addiction. Joseph had to focus where he was at. When he was in Potiphar's house, he was a good servant. And see, and I like how Max Licata kind of buffs it up a little bit, talks about how buff David was, and Potiphar's wife notices that, you know, how buff he is and how good looking a body he has, and, you know, he's my servant, so he's my servant. And I'm sure he was getting looks. He might walk by her door every now and then, and she might not have been fully dressed because she wanted him to compromise. And here's the thing. He probably could have got ahead by compromising. She would have been an advocate of his towards people in authority because her husband was a man of authority. But he didn't compromise his integrity. Can I tell you what's been really important in my walk? And I know some people don't think this is, I know we live in a day of grace. I know that God forgives our mistakes. But integrity is important to me as a minister of the gospel. My celebration of 42 years of marriage are important to me as a minister, and the testimony says you can do this. There are some tough times, but if you make up your mind that it's for, and I'm not saying anything against those that struggled or didn't have that. That's great, but I still want those that are to still be a testimony to others. I love the 50-year celebration. I love that. I hope our next generation starts seeing it in a different way, because right now we're living in a generation where it's, if it don't work, let's just quit. Let's just give up. See, I could have given up. I'm close enough to retirement age. I got enough physical problems that I could have drawn disability. That's not my destiny. No matter how far down we go, I want you to hear this. No matter how far down you go, no matter if you end up in Egypt, it will not defer the destiny God has set in your life to fulfill. I don't care how you get to it. It's going to happen, and you're still going to get to. There's a lot of things you can be cheated out of, but you cannot be cheated out of your destiny. See, that gives me hope that when I look at this is not just about a valley of dry bones. This is about a valley that's got good bones. There's something to build with. Here's a framework that I can do something with. God, you just want me to see its framework and not dead bones. Help me when I'm in those places of crisis. Help me when I'm struggling with trying to figure it out. Help me when I don't know which direction to go, to continue to understand it. No matter if I don't know where I'm going, focus on what I'm doing right now. Do it with all your heart and let God deal with the rest. He is a good servant. He's a man of integrity, and because of it, he gets thrown into prison. Wouldn't you give up at that time? You know what happens? He's the man in charge in prison. He's the man in charge in prison because he still hasn't given up his destiny, because he still hasn't given up his integrity, because he still puts his heart into wherever he's at, and he won't let his circumstances around him keep him from being who God's calling him to be. And you can't help but to do it because it's in you anyway. He breathed. I love what the song said. He breathed into the bones. You done got the breath in them bones. There's life coming whether you see it right now or not, but you got to declare that it's coming. You got to declare. I can't lay in the valley of the bones and throw the bones around me and say, oh, woe is me, God. I got to start prophesying. Bones, you can live. Guess what? There's good news for bones. If you got bones, you got something to work with. Then what happens? Joseph interprets the dream. I think it is the cupbearer. I know one of them get hung and the other one, I think the baker gets hung. I think it's the cupbearer that gets. And you know what Joseph says to him? Just remember me when you get before the king. Guess what the cupbearer does? He don't remember him. 2 years later. But then I stopped to think about something. If he would have remembered him at that point, where would Joseph have been? Because it wasn't until he interprets a dream for the king that he makes second in command in the house. See, we want to get in a hurry with where we're at, but we need to stay another couple years because it's not important yet. It's coming. The time's coming when he's going to remember. When it's really important, he's going to remember. And when he does, I'm going to be called before the king. And when the king sees me and he's heard about my integrity, he's heard about every place I've been, how I've excelled, not only is he going to listen to what I have to say, but he's going to place me in charge to make sure that it gets done. Can I tell you something? The valley of old dry bones is not a place we're going to lay down and die in. It's a place where we're going to rebuild. It's a place where we're going to have new life brought into us. It's a place where we prophesied to the winds, blow winds, let the breath of life breathe again. Restore that which that you tore apart, and that you took apart wasn't any good anyway. But what I'm about to do is, you've got to prophesy to them. Now, I believe Joseph might have struggled just a little bit with forgiveness. And the reason I said it, Miss Pam, I don't know what you said, and I will not. It's not a contradiction. It's just a different look, okay? I think there might have been a little something because he still has his brothers thrown in jail for just a little while. He plants something on them, throws them in jail, and on top of it, he asks for his youngest brother to come, which I know he wants to see him, but it's going to kill his father if something happens to this young man because his other brother's already dead. So he's putting a strain on his dad's health by requiring it. So I'm wondering if there still was maybe a little bit of struggle. And it may not have been, but maybe there was a little bit. But when he gets to thinking about where he is, what it took to get there, he begins to understand this has been the destiny of God my whole life. The dreams that I've seen. And here's the thing, we don't really hear this part. But the dream that he's seen, in his dream he's seen his mama bound down before him. And she never got to see him. If that was the dream where he's just going to be, where his brother's bound down for him, then somebody missed it because his mama died. He didn't get to see her again. But his brothers did. And when they come. And see, I really believe the timing, Miss Pam. I believe sometimes it's the timing because I believe sometimes we're not ready for it. And not that God's not ready for it. His grace is always right there for us right now. But sometimes we're not ready to grab a hold of it. Until we get to the place where we've reassessed who we are, where we looked at what life has dealt us and began to realize it was just a moment in life to prepare us or to propel us into our calling and destiny. Even though we've had some struggles. And I believe in grace. I believe in walking in favor. I believe all those things. But life just happens sometimes. And when it happens, we need to learn how to see what God is trying to do in the midst of that. I think I've learned more. And I do not think God has to do it this way. I never have. I've said all along, people ask me about my grandson and he passed away. He died. It was not God who did it. I do not believe that. I never have. I never will. But I believe God will help me in purpose to see that there was some purpose there. Now, I don't see all that purpose yet, but I believe He will. And I believe this, since I serve a loving God, I believe my grandson is in His arms today. And I believe when I step from this life and unseen into the unseen realm, I'll know my grandson when I see him. And he'll say, you know those times when you held me and I wasn't breathing and you said you were going to be sorry that you're going to miss being able to sing to me? I heard you sing to me. And when you was telling my nephews about Jesus, I heard you telling them. We got to come to a place where wherever we find ourselves at this moment, do it with the best of our ability. Focus on what's here now and let the future take care of itself. Because we got good bones. And, you know, when I'm struggling with that, the Lord said, look around your house here today. He said, what do you see? I said, I see good bones. I see really good bones. I see a real good foundation. He said, well, that's what you're doing. You're shoring up. This is not the end. You're just shoring up the foundation because you got good bones. Hallelujah. We thank you for allowing us to come and minister to you today. Miss Pam, Brother Gary, we came because we love you guys. I just wanted to see you. Just wanted to see how you were doing. I love you guys.
Was that not beautiful today? Oh.